matter. A subject that I know you talk about, I genuinely want to know how you've learned to manage the feeling of loneliness as a leader, or in general. Like when I say loneliness, what washes over you?
Oh, gosh. I mean, that I'm not alone in the feeling of loneliness, right? Like it's everywhere. I think, I'll tell you what made me feel the most lonely is feeling like I had no support around me. I think I felt loneliness, but I don't know that I really had the courage to address it until much later in my career. And it was a moment that I was out with one of my squadrons. This story is actually in the book Dare to Lead. Dr. Brene Brown included this story in the book. And I was out having a conversation with a group of my airmen presenting an award. And at the end of the award, I said, like, what's on your mind? Which is a question I asked regularly. And one of my airmen raised his hand and he said, hey, ma'am, when's the ops tempo going to slow down? Because, like, man, we're super tired.
Operations tempo.
Yeah, ops tempo, sorry. Operations tempo. And I said, yeah, I hear you. Like, we're asking a lot of you. And so I asked the group, I said, how many of you are tired? You know, 3/4 of the whole room raised their hand. And I said, we ask a lot of you. We've been at war for 20 years. When we're not at war, we're at home preparing for an inspection. When we're not preparing for an inspection, we're training for an exercise. Like, there is just always something to be doing. So I get it. Oddly enough, 3 days prior to that conversation, I had read an article in Harvard Business Review. And it was talking about this organization that went into 5 different companies that were all reporting high levels of exhaustion. And it wanted to understand what was happening in those organizations that was causing that. And so it spent months talking to their leaders, talking to their employees, looking at their policies. And it came back after 2 months and said, it's not that people are tired, but people are lonely. And it's the feeling of loneliness that was manifesting itself as this feeling of exhaustion, that's the language we knew to use. Because the truth is, we didn't talk about loneliness at work, but we could talk about being tired. That's almost a badge of honor. Like, oh, I'm just so tired, I'm working so hard. But whenever in my career did I have someone without prompting say, I'm feeling really disconnected and lonely, feeling like I don't really fit here. And so I asked my group that day, if I were to ask you instead of who's tired, who's lonely, how many of you would raise your hands? And I asked it completely rhetorically, because again, not equipped really to have this conversation. And 3/4 of the room raised their hands. And I stood there for a moment, one, kind of paralyzed, like, oh shit, what do I do with this? But 2, heartbroken, because you know this, having spent so much time with DOD, we have an epidemic of rising suicide rates. And I knew that because I'd spent my whole career working with senior leaders every year when the suicide data report was released, trying to once again find just the perfect messaging to reach our airmen, to share with them the tools that were available, the support that was available. And year after year after year, the numbers were increasing and we weren't getting through. And here I am standing in front of a group of, let's be honest, mostly men. And they are sharing something with me that is a very real emotion, one we don't talk about. And I realize that we're not having conversations at the root level. And because we're not having those conversations at the root level, we are wasting so much energy just dealing with the symptoms. Because a word like lonely was so uncomfortable for us that we didn't know how to talk about it. I went to Wing Stand Up, which is our weekly meeting at the wing level. And I went to that meeting that week and I said, we need to be talking about loneliness. You know, luckily I'm at the table now. I'm not in the cheap seats against the wall. And to watch, I mean, you would not have seen discomfort more than we saw in that room that day. Like, they were like, oh my gosh, why is she talking about loneliness? Like, why are we having this conversation? And that was the moment when I watched all of my fellow peers and other commanders. When I saw their discomfort, I realized we're never going to get to the root of this problem if we can't get over the discomfort of language. And that was the moment when I realized I have to use the word lonely if we're ever going to be able to show people it's okay to talk about it, right? Like I had to, as a leader, go first in sharing that. So I think that's when I realized this isn't just a word that we should talk about in the dark corners where no one can really hear us. Like, this is the kind of language we need to be bringing out into the light on a regular basis.
I find this insight not only particularly interesting, but very important, which is because we can publicly talk about being exhausted. And when people are lonely, it may show as exhaustion, it may feel like exhaustion. And so it's the easiest thing to say, especially because we don't want to come to work and say, I'm feeling lonely. And the problem is even if you have a well-intentioned leader who sees that you're exhausted, sees something's wrong, they check in and you report, I am exhausted. They say, you know what? Take a day off.
Yes.
You've been burning the candle at both ends. Why don't you take a day off? Which means go be by yourself more.
Yeah.
Right? So even well-intentioned solutions to the problems that we perceive might, which is why we don't see the numbers change, which is why we see the loneliness epidemic rise and in the military and other places, the suicide rates rising. There's this intense loneliness and nobody knows how to talk about it for fear that it sounds weak or mushy, or just fear that I'm ill-equipped. Even the ones who want to talk about it, what if they say yes? I don't know what do I just there? Like, what do I say?
Yeah.
So I think it's a very important conversation to say that these things exist. A friend of mine who you and I both know, who's active duty still, when they started offering therapists on base to talk to folks, you know, and all the commanders went, hey, we got a therapist on base now. You know, if you're feeling like you need to talk to somebody, I encourage you to go. But that commander never went. And so my friend was very vocal. He's like, look, if you got a busted leg, go see the leg doctor. If you're having thoughts, you go see the head doctor. It's totally normal. And he would say very publicly, hey, I got a lot of stuff going on, feeling super stressed out. I'm not going to be available from 3 to 4 on Thursday because I'm going to go see the therapist. Let me know if you need anything before or after that. He was very public that he was struggling and he was going to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And it normalized it, to your point.
I get brought into organizations that are very male-dominated: construction, law enforcement. I spend a lot of time with finance, which isn't always male-dominated.
Yeah, it's pretty broy.
Still, yeah.
Let's be honest, it's pretty broy.
And 2 of those 3 are because they too are really struggling with suicide rates and mental health, mental health crisis.
Yeah.
And they bring me in because of, I think, my ability to talk about these hard things without being too soft, because I come from such a hard background. Right. And if I'm being really honest, like, I would have told you up until probably 2015, emotions have no place here. We've got real shit to do.
I've known you that long.
Yeah. We don't need to be talking about feelings.
I've known tough Dede.
And what I realized is not talking about feelings was causing all the problems that were getting in the way of us doing good work.
Yeah.
That you can avoid it for only so long. It's going to come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
The problem in the military is that we rotate so much that we don't always see the long-term consequences of that.